Good morning, ladies of Woman Come Forth. I hope your day is off to a great start. I've had an early start so that I could get in an extra workout because for some odd reason, and of no fault of my own, I've noticed that there's been a little extra weight hanging around and my clothes are fitting a little bit tighter. It can't have anything to do with all the chicken wings and french fries I'm eating. And it seemed like it just happened overnight. I just woke up one day and the weight was there. So now that I'm noticing it, I have to do something about it. So I've gotten up and I've gotten my workout in and I am ready for my day. But as I was thinking about how that weight snuck up on me overnight, but in actuality, it was a continuous buildup of the decisions that I was making and how I didn't really notice it as it was happening. But then over time, those little changes begin to have a bigger impact on me and on my waistline. So it's funny how over time things can build up for us physically, but also spiritually. And of course, it made me think about the scripture Hebrews 12:1, which says, "Let us strip off everything that slows us down, especially the sin that so easily trips us up." And so it's interesting because the King James Version, which you're probably familiar with, that says, "Let us lay aside every weight that so easily besets us." When I was actually studying, I thought about it and I saw that the word beset actually means to surround. And so I thought about how it seemed like this weight was surrounding my waist. But it's so important, though, that we move on. I kept going and kept reading to see the next part of that verse that says, especially the sin that so easily trips us up. And it's funny when you think about it, when you trip. I'm sure you've tripped before. I've tripped before. The thing about it, when we trip, normally it happens when we are moving towards something or we are moving on a path and something somehow finds its way in our path and we don't see it or we don't recognize it, and then we trip or we stumble over it. Sometimes we even fall. But during that trip, while we're tripping, we stop and we right ourselves and we move that thing out of our path, and then we continue forward. And the same thing is true for us spiritually. And apparently, God wanted me to have a real life example to share with you today, because I just experienced this recently. And I'm going to be transparent. I'm going to tell on myself. So I'm not sure if you know me or not, but if you know me, you know that I am single again. Now, some people like to say divorced, but I prefer the term single again. And so a couple of weeks ago, I was having a conversation with my ex-husband. And we were trying to make some decisions and trying to figure some things out, doing this whole co-parenting thing, which is working. But there was one thing that we just kept getting stuck on, or we would move forward and then find ourselves right back at that same thing again. And while we were having the conversation, God revealed to me what was happening and what had happened in my life. And so I realized that you could have a conversation with me and we could talk about my marriage. We could talk about my experience, and I could tell you the things that he had done to me, and we could laugh about it. I could tell you, okay, I'm healed. I've forgiven him. I've moved on. And that would be completely true. But what I realized was that while I had forgiven him, when I thought about and when I talked about the things that I had done for him, the mood changed a little bit. And so I realized that I hadn't forgiven me. Now, when you're going through any type of difficult relationship or transition in your life, oftentimes it's really talked about to forgive the other person, forgive the person that has wronged you. It's not talked about as much. It's made small to forgive yourself. And so that was something that I hadn't really focused on, or something that I hadn't thought about. But in that moment, while I was in the middle of the conversation, God said to me, he said, you have to let that go too. And I'll admit that, I can multitask a little bit. So while I'm talking to him, talking to my ex-husband, I'm talking to God. And I'm like, what do you mean I need to let that go? All the stuff that I did, I think that it needs to be remembered. I think that, it should be honored. But he said, you have to let that go too, because it's weighing you down. And so in the moment, I made the decision to lay that thing aside. I chose to let it go and to no longer allow it to slow me down. And the crazy thing is, while I knew what effect it had on me there, when I began to think about it, I realized how me not forgiving myself had showed up in my life in other areas. So I was happy to be able to make that decision to lay it down and no longer give it that power in my life. So on this Monday morning, I simply want to encourage you to find that thing or those things in your life, not just the obvious things, but the not so obvious things that have skillfully surrounded you in every direction. Those things that have come into your life and you find yourself in the midst of and realize that it has become a burden or it has become a weight that you've been carrying around. And you may have been wearing it as a badge of honor, but yet and still you've been carrying that weight. And that is something that at this point in your life, you realize that you need to let go of it. So I encourage you to intentionally seek that thing out. Look for those things that have caused you to trip. Look for those things that slow you down. Look for that fear. Look for that doubt, that worry, that hate, that frustration, that disappointment, that anger, those unresolved feelings, that disappointment. Look for those things and make a choice to do something about them. My prayer for you today is simply that you will find those things, you will choose to lay them aside, and that you will run into this week with renewed energy and restored joy, because you know it, the world is waiting for you to come forth. Have a wonderful day.